Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this discussion on thought leadership. We're going to get started in just a moment. So just a few notes before we begin. Attendee phones are in listen-only mode today. Questions are welcome. We're going to be doing a Q&A at the end of the presentation. They are anonymous to other attendees. You can submit them at any time, and Lori and I will do our best to answer them at the end. The webinar is also being recorded, so anyone who's registered will receive a link following the event should you want to share it or review it after. Okay. So if you're not very familiar with BioSpace already, we're the leading news and career site in biopharma with over 1 million monthly visitors and hundreds of thousands of subscribers. We have 2 podcast shows, The Weekly, which features our news team discussing the biggest stories of the week, and Denatured, which does deep dives into big picture issues and topics impacting our industry. We also have a bunch of free newsletters you can sign up for on biospace.com. You can hit subscribe in the top right, and you'll see what we have there. We also release regular reports on labor market trends, compensation benchmarking, our annual salary report, reports on branding, and lots more. So definitely feel free to go and download. They're all free. So we recently published a white paper on this very topic of thought leadership, which is essentially a guide on what thought leadership is, how you can use it in your content and branding strategies. We will be emailing a link to the download page in our follow-up after the event, so you don't need to go hunting around for it. And about today, so I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Chantal Dresner, the VP of Marketing at BioSpace. In my role, I work very closely with our marketing, news, and the BioSpace Insights team, both to build the BioSpace audience, as well as work closely with our clients, supporting them to help them meet their marketing and their branding goals. I'm joined today by Lori Ellis, our head of insights, who is the brains behind a lot of our client content and our insights work, and has very direct experience with client content strategies and execution. Hi, Lori.
Thank you. Hello. Nice to be here.
Okay, so why are we talking about thought leadership today? For many organizations, decisions about how they are spending their money in a very lean environment are requiring very high levels of consideration, a lot of thought, and a lot of intention. When it comes to how, with whom you're going to be spending your money, what's the most important thing as a potential buyer? Trust. You want to be able to trust the person that you're buying from. You want to trust the organization, the product that you're investing in, that they are a good choice, they're credible, they know what they're talking about, they know what they are doing. That's what you want to feel, so that you ultimately think that you're going to see a return on that investment. So what is thought leadership exactly? We're going to have Lori talk you through this.
Sure. So as Chantal had said, you have to build trust. And how do you do that? Well, obviously, your expertise, your credibility, innovation, critical sites, perspective, leadership. Yes, it's all of that. But it really has to focus into a targeted PR strategy. And so you can be as an expert in a situation, but people have to like you. So you pick a topic that you are passionate about, that you have the expertise about, and then you start systematically and strategically creating content around that, whether it's podcasts, webinars, panel discussions. Very seldom do you actually speak about your company. First, you're establishing yourself as I'm credible, I have the expertise, I'm innovative because I'm always thinking about what's happening in the present, but then also the future. And you're giving your perspective, which can be a little scary and can be a little vulnerable, but you have something to say and you say it. And you're showing leadership by doing so.
Thank you, Lori. So one thing I want to address is also how thought leadership and that concept of thought leadership differs from marketing and advertising strategies. A lot of times, I think that people can think that they're essentially one and the same. A lot of times in practice, I think that they can be confused. So to Lori's point about it not being so much focused on your products or your services, but more what you think, and whether you're part of the present, thinking about the future. Thought leadership is really focused on that bigger picture, that trust, that credibility, while marketing and advertising are essentially tactics to support the promotion of that product or service that you may offer. So they're definitely the most effective when you have good execution on both sides of that strategy and they work in conjunction with each other. And they both influence your audience or, the potential buyer in different ways. So if you're thinking about your target audience and that buyer journey of awareness, consideration, decision, thought leadership is driving awareness of those areas of expertise. Like, who are the players in your space? Like your business, your competitors. How is thought leadership influencing consideration? It's building that trust, that credibility. You're bringing in other elements and other qualities like innovation and leadership in your niche. And in terms of influencing the decision, it's about confidence level. So are the people that you are speaking to, that target audience, that target buyer, do they have confidence that you would be the best option for them to meet their needs? And can you be a true partner? Can you anticipate needs that maybe they haven't thought of yet? Can you give them like a comprehensive and holistic service that helps them succeed? So that is very different from raising awareness about products or services, the product features, the value prop that you would typically see in marketing and advertising. And a lot of it is really around as well brand alignment or wanting to be associated with a certain kind of ideal or perception, of those qualities that we mentioned, like innovation. So you need to ensure that that sentiment that they have towards you or your organization is one of confidence.
So I'm going to pick up a little bit on some of the comments that Chantal just said. Think of yourself as almost a brand ambassador of not only your company, but whatever your perspectives are. You already know what your areas are of expertise. What you really want to focus on is what is currently happening in that market and how it applies to the future. Now, it may have a little bit to do with your company, but it may not. So you want to start building your trust there. And this is part of the strategy. You focus in your content in a very clear and concise way. And so that means if, say, your focus is on cybersecurity and AI and patient data, well, then you focus in on that. And all of your content from a PR perspective really focuses in on that, and it's your passion. Then you start to share and you engage and you build awareness. Now, one of the things that I really want to highlight is it has to be authentic and it has to be true to you, because it's much different from writing from a perspective where it is a focus and a goal, but it's not your true passion. And that comes out specifically when you're doing anything visual or audio, because you can hear that. And when you hear that someone is getting excited, like right now, I'm getting a little excited, so you can see how my tone is changing. It's the psychology of it. That type of strategy that falls into thought leadership then is what helps increase your brand awareness and then guide your marketing, because they can take those little snippets, those articles, those audio podcasts, and they can start building that out. So you have your thought leadership, but then you have an additional marketing component where they can keep going and keep reinforcing that you're a leader and that your company is also a leader. So going into thought leadership practice, these are some of the ways that thought leadership is effective. So one, webinars. Now you've seen the traditional presentation style webinars. For thought leadership, they fall into what's currently going on in the industry. For instance, the draft guidance for AI. You're seeing those come up, and basically no one's really talking about their company. They're just talking about how this affects you, which is how it affects the client, focusing on that challenge and the client has, and then really saying, I understand it, and let me help you. But then also there are discussion-based ones. And those are very interesting because people are giving their perspectives. Both are educational, both fall into thought leadership, but it's the question of which one are you more comfortable with? Do you want to have a more interactive discussion base around, for instance, the AI draft guidance and what that means and some of the challenges you're seeing? Or do you want to have an explanation? White papers are the same type of situation. They're more of an in-depth written word of really discussing challenges and what you've seen in the market and where you see it's going in the future. Newsletters falls into it. All of these are very scalable. They can be repurposed and reused for marketing campaigns. Then when you move into some different versions, commentary, usually media is asking for commentary on what's going on in the industry, and so you can give your perspective out there. Articles, same thing. You can either do the earned media thought leadership perspective, which, let's be honest, reporters and journalists, they always ask for quotes, or you can create your own opinions and have them out in the world. Podcasts are great as well. And once again, there's the two versions. There is the educational, but then there's a discussion based. And the educational for a podcast is more of an interview style where a journalist is asking you questions versus discussion based is usually two to maybe 3 to 4 people having a conversation. Infographics, fantastic. It's an easy way to get your perspective out, just on how whatever challenges is happening right now, how that influences your clients and then the future. And then obviously LinkedIn posts. And you can do this through a different way, a bunch of different ways. You can have the commentary of your post, or you can comment on other people. And I will caution LinkedIn posts. Thought leadership is giving your perspective on another post or creating your own post. It's not taking what's happening in the news and just listing it out again. While that has a place, if you really want to establish yourself as a thought leader, you really want to have an opinion and you really want to have a perspective that you're willing to share.
Or you want to be able to contextualize it. Here are these things that are happening, and this is why it's significant to our business, and here's why it's significant to your business. So I want to dive as well into a little bit of these things in a little bit more detail. And we're going to kind of go through some of like the key formats that we see thought leadership happening most commonly in practice, and talk a little bit more about, events, webinars, roundtable discussions. Why do we like them? Why do organizations like to do these kind of events? I think in one way, it's really just about putting a face and a personality, both to you and your organization. It's an opportunity to be personable. You have the opportunity to interact with your audience, whether it's a live in-person event or a virtual event. There's opportunity to engage directly. There's opportunities to have questions and answers and talk to people directly immediately when those things come up. And another benefit of webinars, particularly if you're really focused on commercial strategies and lead generation, if it's an online event and you have people registering, those are people that you can follow up with. You have great opportunities to follow up to add to your network of contacts and leads. And there's a reason why those are so beneficial. Now, when it comes to best practices, I'll let Lori talk you through some best practices. She has got a lot of experience with both in-person events and roundtable discussions online. Lori, what are your kind of like top tips of how you can make them engaging?
Making them engaging is one, if you're on a panel and a presentation, you really do want to bring it down to a human level. So let's be honest, we've sat through ones where they were just all stats, or it was just a presentation rolling. You want to have that personal connection. The most successful ones have been charming, as in they've told jokes. Now, I don't say that you have to go and learn how to speak. That's not it. But it's really bringing it down on that human level and making the topic and the information relatable, not just from a business standpoint, but also from that everyday standpoint. One of the best, most recent ones was a panel that I just did at the Bioprocessing Summit. And one of the best examples was for AI is that how AI had never encountered a Boston seagull. So when the driving cars were trying to navigate Boston, the seagull would stand there, the car would stand there indefinitely. Well, that was something very relatable, and it really drove home the point on some of the challenges of data and AI. Discussions on trends and methodologies, one of the tips or insights is really try to stay as current and futuristic as possible.
Mhm.
One, you want to focus on challenges today, but they
Mhm.
also have to influence of what happens tomorrow
Yeah.
and what happens 5 years from now.
And anticipating what those challenges are going to be.
Right. And then when you're presenting research and case studies, these are actually very valuable when you can present them to an audience that is having that current struggle. And
Mhm.
once again, I'll head to AI because it's the most recent thing in my head. Having an industry expert or a panel who knows what they can say and what they can't say, that's important, but can really sit down and say, yes, I understand your challenges. This is how it applies, and this is the benefits, and this is how it gets there. And
Mhm.
so I think those are some of the tips and tricks.
Mhm.
Obviously, try to be concise.
Mhm.
Oh, yes. Let's avoid selling the product directly and avoid selling the company directly. You're already there.
Yeah.
Your company name has already been there. You have already established the credibility of the company, but that is established by what you say and how you say it and the insights that you provide. That's really what sells the company and sells the product. When you're a company, this is, I guess, for the marketing department, is that when you're checking out to see what SMEs that you want to send out,
Mhm.
it's ones that present well
Mhm.
and use ones that can really bring it down to that human nature.
Mhm.
And I would also say, have people that are present and can really be thoughtful in the discussions.
Mhm.
That is so much more engaging
Mhm.
and people respond better to it.
Mhm.
And then from the marketing standpoint, obviously you want to follow up with everyone.
Make sure they know. Make sure they know what's going
Mhm.
on.
Mhm.
Great. If you have any more questions about live events, webinars, roundtable discussions, again, don't hesitate to pop anything into the Q&A and we can always hop back and address anything later. I want to talk about podcasts. Lori, why do you like podcasts?
Oh, I love podcasts. I love podcasts, honestly, because you can listen to them anywhere.
Mhm.
And also, the market is growing. And so, let's be honest, when you're listening to a podcast, you're usually doing it in the car, or
Mhm.
you're on a plane, or you're working out. They are more of an intimate setting.
Mhm.
You can also hear someone's passion in
Mhm.
their voice and when they're speaking. And you don't fully have the attention, but then you do. Because when something comes up, and I'll be very honest with you, I listen to them all the time. Sometimes I'm just listening to them while I'm driving or whatnot, but then I'll stop if
Mhm.
something's very engaging and then I want to learn more.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'll rewind it and listen to it again, or sometimes I'll just go look at the company. Those are the ways that you can get to an audience that maybe doesn't have time to read an article. Let's be honest, a lot of us are time poor.
Yeah.
So you're now engaging with a different sense.
Yeah.
But then also, they have a very long shelf life.
Mhm.
So when you're listening to podcasts, like I have a 6 hour drive right now, they'll just keep streaming.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm listening to podcasts that were put out like a year or two ago. As
Mhm.
long as it's still relevant,
Yeah.
it makes sense to me. And I think from a marketing standpoint, I think, Chantel, you know that a lot of the information is easy to repurpose from a
Yes.
podcast.
Yeah.
You can use it in other aspects. You can use it for articles. You can use it for blogs. You
Yeah.
can use little snippets and take quotes out.
Mhm. Yeah, and I do like when you start on podcasts, it is also like a new channel that you've likely not targeted before. So there is the potential to sort of like reach those new audiences. If you don't have content, on Spotify, on Apple, wherever it is that you're sharing, it's just like an additional place for your brand to be. And a lot of people, when they're looking for podcasts, they're either looking for a particular show, or they might be looking for a media outlet that they like NPR or something like that. They're looking for those topics, or they're doing keyword searches around specific topics that they're looking for. And so it's nice that it's like very high intent. I think when people come across a podcast, and to Lori's point, when it's something that's work related, especially with your audience, if you're doing kind of like B2B kind of type content, it's a lot of people are listening to that content, while they're working. You might be doing something and you have that on in the background. And I think that it is a great way to reach a lot of new people who maybe you weren't exposed to on that channel before. Now, in terms of making those podcasts successful, I think a lot of the advice Lori would probably give is similar to how you would make any kind of thought leadership content successful, but there are some kind of like unique ways that you found podcasts work especially well for.
Yeah, so a lot of the tips I would give are the same. I would definitely highlight though the perspectives, and I
Mhm.
personally love to do more of a discussion based,
Mhm.
whether it's an interview about a current event
Mhm.
or it's a discussion based with two SMEs versus one, and that's a
Mhm.
subject matter expert, and having them give and share their point of views.
Mhm.
Now, storytelling works very well during these kind of type of discussions. Also, those engaging conversations where it almost seems like they're sitting around and having coffee and having this discussion. So it's very
Mhm.
intimate.
Mhm.
Would caution with storytelling. Storytelling can get a little dangerous. So if you're business storytelling, you have to make sure that you trust whoever you're working with so that if you accidentally say something, they're going to be willing to take it out later. That's
Mhm.
important because we don't want to have anyone fired. But then on the personal side, be as authentic as possible
Mhm.
because we are in an industry that they can tell if you're not being authentic.
Mhm.
And sometimes stories are just hard to share.
Mhm.
So be willing to go there. And if you're not, it's okay. You don't have to. That's the beauty of thought leadership. You can, and it's storytelling aspect of it, you can put out as much there as you want or as little as you want. It'll be effective either way.
Right. It's bringing to mind. I don't know if you've seen recent or a few weeks ago, there was a clip that was making rounds of the CEO of Applebee's kind of telling a personal story about when she had kind of risen through the ranks and she had been promised a position and then was denied. And so she basically was telling the story about how she went out, went to work for like a competitor, bought out that company, and then called that CEO who wouldn't give her the position she was promised and was like, sorry, you're going to be gone now because we've just bought your, we've just bought Applebee's. But that was just an example of personal storytelling that was incredibly relatable. And this is the CEO of like an absolutely massive company, but that personal sharing of being burned in the workplace was incredibly relatable and resonated with a lot of people. And it's just like a really great example of how that kind of personal storytelling can be really impactful. And she was kind of,
Right.
hailed as this, wonderful, great leader. And it was great to see someone, just being very honest about that experience.
Right. I have seen, particularly senior leadership, when they relate a personal story, they can change the tone of the room
Mhm.
when they share something that was hard for them to share or a
Mhm.
hard experience. And if they do it in a way, sometimes I've seen people that are really new at it, and they do it in a way that's so incredibly honest,
Mhm.
that translates
Yeah,
and that humanizes
absolutely.
individuals as well. I think also something that is not mentioned that often, particularly when a podcast happens or a webinar or a panel discussion, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Like you have notes and that's great, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be perfect. It's more of what's in the moment.
Mhm.
Sometimes people are talking over each other, particularly during my podcast, and that's fine
Yeah.
because that makes it
In a
fun
normal
and it makes it super
conversation.
engaging.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's actually going to bring me to like the next thing that I wanted to touch on with you, Lori, is kind of those tips and tricks. And I think that you probably agree with me when I was putting these notes together, but for recordings, for things like podcasts, great to be prepared. Of course, you want to be prepared, but I think it's very important to remain unscripted because
Yes.
your point that you're saying before about tone of voice, yes, again, there's probably like maybe particular things that particular points that you remember that you want to make. You have an outline for yourself, questions have been agreed on of what themes and topics you're going to cover, but don't script yourself. You want to sound like a normal person when you're talking. You don't want to sound like you're reading something out. So I think that it's important to remind people to just like have confidence. Like this is your area of expertise. Like, what you're talking about. You know what you can do. You know what you can discuss. You know your subject matter, you are the expert, so have confidence in that and don't feel like you need to rely on a script too heavily.
I agree completely. And I know this is so hard to say. Well, it's easy to say, but it's hard to do. Relax.
Yeah.
I just, particularly for podcasts, because anything can be edited out. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just what it is. Live, it can't be. So you have to be a little bit more focused and whatnot. But you're absolutely right. You don't have to hit every point. You
Mhm.
can follow up, and it's okay. And we're
Mhm.
all human. And I think that's what makes us more relatable of, I'm
Yeah.
in the moment. I have notes. I have notes right here. And I'm saying what I want to say, but I'm saying them in the way that is far more dynamic.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right.
And I think that to that point about being present and being engaged, if you have a script that you're too focused on, it kind of detracts away from that in the moment engagement when you're having that conversation.
Yeah.
So articles is the next thing that I kind of want to talk about. So articles or written content have kind of been like the go-to form of thought leadership for a very long time. They're shareable, they're very consumable, they have the potential to drive traffic to your site, they come up in searches, and they offer a lot of time and space for clarity and detail about what it is that you want to say. So there's never kind of like, ooh, I'm worried I'm going to say the wrong thing. Well, when you're writing something, you have that ongoing dialogue with yourself and what you're putting out there. There's that chance for review to be really clear. So I think in terms of articles, the advice that we have is kind of the same for other media. Focus on education, adhere to good publishing principles. I think that that is something that can often get lost when you are looking at doing, partnered content for articles. Use external sources. Have a couple of sources, ideally, share examples, reference things that solidify your argument or support your point of view. Use a really good, strong headline. I think people underestimate the power of a headline. I mean, me obviously working with news teams and working with the insights team, I work in marketing. Headline is like everything, right? And that description to introduce your topic, that's so important. Use really high quality images. I think people often forget the power of an image. The picture is 1,000 words. Use a great image to promote your content and to really kind of be like a visual representation of what you're kind of trying to get across. And of course, try to present a unique angle. What Lori was saying even about LinkedIn posts. Sorry, Lori, I can see that you want to say something.
No, you go for it. You go first.
Don't just say what's happening. Yes, if you're talking about an issue, talk about what's happening, but talk about why it's important. Talk about what it means for the future. Talk about what it means for the present. But try to take like that unique angle and put your own spin on it and provide your own point of view.
Yeah, and I think I'd also caution, don't try to shove everything in there. Sometimes a pot of soup is great, but if you have too many cooks in that pot of soup, then it's a lousy pot of soup because now you've put everything in there. And an article, remember, people are time poor. And so you want to stay about 1,000 words. I've seen articles that were 7 pages long and the word count was like 3,000 to 5,000 words. I don't have time for that.
Yeah. Short and sweet, to the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Kind of with white papers, I'll just touch on this briefly. There's a lot of room for in-depth content and detail with white papers. White papers to me are kind of like an oldie but a goodie, if you will. There's a lot of room for you to demonstrate a lot of expertise in a lot of different ways. There's opportunities for visual branding, and from a lead generation perspective, people downloading your white paper, that's a clear indication of interest in your organization, in you, in that topic. And so there's a chance that that's going to make for a great lead later down the line. So when you're looking at, yes, go for it.
I do apologize. I also would add to that new voices in your company that have not had a chance yet. But for marketing teams, I think this is very important for marketing teams. When you're looking for new voices, start trying them out with some of the white papers and integrating them into for quotes and whatnot, because then you get a really good feel of how they will approach topics. And that gives you a little bit more confidence when you're looking for them for the future.
Thanks, Lori. And when it comes to white papers, just in terms of how you can use them, there's so many ways that you can use them. They can be research driven. So either conduct your own survey, conduct a survey with a partner, and like provide analysis of the data that you get back, guides or explainers of how to do X, Y, Z, the trends, the forecasting, looking at that bigger picture from your perspective, what you've seen. You can use case studies. You can really write these on your own or in partnership. So I think that white papers have a lot of legs. There's also a lot of opportunity in terms of what you can do with it. You can promote it in a lot of different ways. You can break it down in a lot of ways, and you can also cross promote in a lot of ways. So like with your newsletters, of any other kind of media that you're doing, white papers are a really good way to, they're like kind of like that big rock content that you can kind of break up and distribute into additional things. So overall, what are the kind of like big takeaways to how to make your content true thought leadership? Avoid selling. I would say use external sources. Another thing I will mention about external sources, we talked about brand ambassadorship. When you have external sources that take part in your media, they become additional brand ambassadors for you. So if you are working with someone that joins your discussion, whether that's your roundtable, your podcast, they have a discussion with you, there's a very, very high likely chance that they're also going to share that content that they worked on with you. That's like additional promotion and additional brand alignment that you're getting from external sources. And it's just more validation that you're a leader in your field. And of course, the number one thing is education over promotion. And again, something that you can speak to with authority when you're looking at what you want to talk about. Provide insight, provide suggestions of how people can approach different challenges or issues in your field, in your niche, a specific problem, something that affects your target audience. Okay, I think we're going to shift at this point to look at a few case studies.
Sure.
Just to kind of talk and see it in practice, because I think that is often very helpful as a learning tool, is seeing things in practice. Laura, do you want to kind of talk through some of these examples?
Sure. So this was a webinar, but it was actually more of a discussion. And Evotech had two SMEs, and once again, that's subject matter experts. And they didn't really mention much about their company at all. So it was more focused on what is going on in the pharmaceutical industry, what they are seeing as challenges, also how to navigate in the future, and obviously the present, and then suggestions going forward. And so they were very strategic in, we want to help the industry. And that's how they established the fact that they were educating biotech leaders. They were also instilling confidence, but then they were also giving the industry some optimism in a time where there's perhaps not as much optimism. So, and I've just basically restated the strategy, but that's how they ended up doing all of that. And it was really taking a look at what the current problem is, what's happening in the landscape, how do I help you? How do I help you mitigate risks to your fund, your investors? How do I help you mitigate risks to your operations? But doing it in such a way where it was, we're going to talk global regulatory, we're going to talk about the landscape, but we're also going to talk about some of the challenges we have seen and how we would approach them and how we think that you might want to consider approaching them.
And what kind of speakers did they have as part of their discussion?
So generally speaking, for these type of conversations, you want to have C-suite executives. So one was very focused. Well, actually, both of them had about 35 plus years within the industry.
Yeah.
And so generally speaking, it's usually on a VP or C-suite executive level. And what that does is already show that leadership, already have that understanding of, I've been through this, I know what's going on, and I'm going forward.
Right.
So this was really cool because it was a blend of business and science. And so the perspectives went back and forth. So you had the scientific perspective, but then you had the business perspective. So it was a very good synergy.
Podcast.
This podcast. So this actually was with Peter Marks and Jen Scripps was the one that supported it. They weren't on the podcast at all. This is actually a part of a series. And basically it was presented by Jen Script, which shows that they are supporting the industry and they want the industry to move forward. But Dr. Peter Marks and I actually spoke without anyone else there.
Right.
And GenScript demonstrated that they're a thought leader and they're a supporter of the industry just by the fact that they had the podcast.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, at this point, they have also established their brand as being part of cell and gene therapies, because that was what the discussion was on, but also with Peter Marks.
Yeah. And that was like the key theme of their forum that Dr. Peter Marks was a part of. And you mentioned that it was a series, and the other episode in that series was actually additional conversations with other featured speakers from their event. And so there was this great follow-up discussion to everything that kind of more interactive than maybe what was able to be discussed in the moment at the event they were giving their speeches.
So yeah, Dr. Peter Marks and Tom Whitehead from the Emily Whitehead Foundation, they were the ones that were prior to the actual event. Then we had the discussion. So this gave us a little bit more of an in-depth conversation to really be able to get into some of the nitty-gritty that may not be appropriate for a keynote happening during a live event.
This was another webinar that we ran. It was ended up being a bit of a series.
Right. So these are great because they provide straight education. And so they identify the challenges that are going in or happening right at the current time. And they go through with the audience and explain what the challenges are, and then give them education on how or solutions that may be effective for those challenges.
This was more of like a nuts and bolts approach of kind of getting into the real nitty-gritty and providing education on like specific practical approaches and practical solutions. And what was interesting about this is that I found that they actually took learnings from like the first event that they had and a lot of the questions and the interactions that they had with the people engaging with that event, and use that to inform their future content strategy of like, oh, these are things that like we need to address in addition, and these are questions that we can help answer, and these are things that people want to know, and they use that to produce additional content and additional thought leadership opportunities. The last one that I kind of want to just touch base on is an example of how you can use thought leadership as part of your employer branding. So we also have seen like a lot of clients, they're looking to grow their team. They've maybe opened a new site or a new facility, or they've expanded their pipeline and they're looking to recruit for specific kind of roles. And so what this organization did, they used an executive's personal storytelling who was going to be heading up that new department to really highlight the employer brand, their work culture, and really they were trying to like drive applicants to raise awareness of like all of these job openings that they had. So the article ended up interviewing that executive who talked through their career development at the organization, their inclusivity initiatives, as well as what the research was kind of going to be focused on, just to really highlight that company and what they were doing that was new that they hadn't been doing before. Okay, so the last thing I kind of want to touch on is how you integrate with marketing. So obviously, thought leadership we've talked about is this targeted PR strategy, but if you're really looking to generate leads, you need to really clearly define your goals and target audience, and you need to work closely with your marketing team to have a very robust integrated program to support those goals. So you're identifying your target audience. I would recommend then building segments that reach context that you can leverage later. So for example, if you can see who has engaged with your content, who has registered for your event, who has downloaded your white paper, etc., you can leverage those contacts later, either for direct emailing or potentially retargeting campaigns, but you can also use them to build like lookalike type audiences, because those are people that are going to be interested in your content if you want to actually pay to promote that content later down the line. I would also make sure that you're coordinating the promotion of that content with marketing activities. Ensure everyone who participated and their company is tagged. Obviously, if they've given you permission to do that, make sure those details are all correct when you hand it over to your marketing team, so they can really optimize sharing, they can optimize visibility online, and really make the most of it and get as much mileage out of that content as you can. And then really making sure that you have that plan in place to follow up with those contexts that you've worked so hard to essentially collect, and that awareness and that momentum that you are building. Now, when it comes to like, a lot of people say like, oh, like, how do I know if this is working? I would say that there are short and long-term, like, performance indicators, KPIs, and you have to really understand like what is important to you. A lot of the short-term metrics are going to be around engagement. So views, impressions, listens, if it's a podcast, downloads. But long-term is a little different. It's less about views, but it's more about a sustained thought leadership strategy. Can be wide-ranging, but the results will be broader. So you're getting asked now to sit on a panel. You're now getting asked to provide a quote, perhaps, for an article. You're getting asked by your own clients or prospective clients. They're coming to you with questions because they are wanting to hear your perspective and take your advice, or maybe they're asking questions about data that you may have because they might see that you're producing content like that. So they might come to you with questions because they know that you're an expert in that field. You might just gain more meaningful market visibility. So the next time you're networking or you're at an in-person event, there's brand recognition. You introduce yourself and people know what company you're from. They know who you are. They understand already what you do, paving the way for a more natural, organic conversation. So ultimately, the end goal for any business embarking on a thought leadership journey is to really just create those opportunities that help you down the line generate revenue. It's not the immediate goal. It's kind of like that long-term goal. And the results of your efforts should just, naturally result in more meetings booked, more sales made. And when you're looking at whether or not something is working, just remember that it is a long-term strategy that requires consistency and sustained effort. It's not going to just happen overnight. It's not like you can do just, put one thing out there or like one post on LinkedIn and think that, fortunes are going to change. It's just about consistent effort at showcasing what that expertise and that credibility looks like. And so when you're measuring success, if you're looking at, for example, sales activity specifically around lead generation, like meetings booked or revenue, just be sure to consider the length of your sales cycle as well as those broader advertising and marketing strategies. And just, make notes. If there's a way that you can do that to kind of organize that data for yourself, then great. But just remember that it's a longer term sustained effort. We're taking kind of questions if anyone has. I can see that there's a couple of questions in the queue that I'm just going to open up and discuss. So if you have anything else that you want to say, please feel free to drop it in. Being asked, do you use AI tools with this process? If so, which ones? I wouldn't say that there's anything. I can start answering, Lori, unless you have kind of like thoughts on this. But really, AI tools in this process, I would say, I think it can help in terms of like ideation. If you need a sounding board for ideation or how you want to outline your own thoughts, I think it can be a great research tool. So like if you're, for example, looking at how to formulate a discussion around a particular topic, I think that AI tools can help, like the Copilots, the Chat GPTs, the Perplexity.ai. Again, I think that they're great for research and to use as a sounding board for ideation. But ultimately, from my perspective, that thought leadership and that expertise should already be with you. Like it's not going to help you find a topic because you already kind of know what the issues are, what the challenges are, but it can definitely help organize your thoughts, if that makes sense. So I think that you can use it as a research tool, use it to help organize things that you may want to talk about. But ultimately, that knowledge is probably already within you. It can kind of just be something that you use to help refine your delivery, perhaps.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that we're talking about, particularly audio and visual, no, you really can't use AI tools. You can use them when you're trying to figure out headlines to how to label something. As far as research goes, I can tell you, be cautious.
Yeah.
And the reason why I can tell you to be cautious is that I have played with AI and I have
Mhm.
purposely broken it or made it hallucinate. It made itself a doctor at one point
Yeah.
and attributed quotes to itself.
Yeah.
On another hand, I have asked for a summary of something that I did, and I wanted to see what it would come up with, and it was wrong.
Mhm.
I also have been plagiarized. Uh, there was an article, and I think Chantal, I made you aware of it, where they clearly used AI and they attributed quotes into the article that weren't there. And it was based off of a podcast discussion. So I
Mhm.
agree with Chantal. And I agree that any type of AI tool that you use, whether it's a summary or this and that, you have to really go in. Even if you're using it as a first draft for an article, go in and you have to really look at each sentence
Yeah.
and each item that it's coming up with because you don't even know sometimes if it's made up the
Yeah.
source.
I would always like
And
to go to
it
the
has.
original source and look at the original
Yeah.
source. So if it'll like pull up references for what it's talking about, I would go look at those original
Yeah.
sources to see if it's actually relevant. But at the end of the day, thought leadership is really about your knowledge. What do you want to say? What's your perspective? So any AI tools, I would say, can help refine your ideas, but it's not gonna create it for you.
Use it as an assistant, use it as a research assistant, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another great question that we have here. How can a thought leader promote themselves as a participant roundtable discussions with other brands or platforms, like besides normal networking efforts? Lori, do you have any advice in that respect?
Well, I think that's more of a marketing question. I, I am probably horrible at promoting myself.
I don't think that that's true.
I am, but
But
I'm not because I feel like the way I approach it is generally I'm grateful
yeah,
and very honest. And
mhm,
so, believe it or not, that falls into promotion.
yeah,
I am always very appreciative of any opportunity I get
yeah,
to do anything, particularly moderating. But then I also understand how time poor everyone is.
mhm,
And so I honestly thank them. And I don't do it to promote myself. That's the funny thing. And I think that's why I'm horrible. That's why I say I'm horrible at it. I generally do not do it to promote myself.
mhm,
I just, that's what my LinkedIn is. It's
right,
usually a thank you or this conversation was fun.
yeah.
And I'm horrible at actually saying what the conversation is. I'm just like, this was a great conversation. So that's how
Um,
I approach it. So it's more of a marketing question.
I have a few ideas. So one, kind of to Lori's point, is I would be visible on a platform like LinkedIn and tag relevant companies and people where you can to kind of gain attention. If you have something to say, put it in a LinkedIn post and post it. When you go to an event, make sure you're following up and posting on LinkedIn. For example, like your key takeaways, your key learnings, what you got out of that event. Other things that you can do, you can always, so something that I would recommend is trying to potentially submit opinion pieces and become a guest contributor on different publications. So for example, you might have a reaction to something that's happened in the news cycle, like some decision that's been made, a deal that's been made, a regulatory change. You might have an opinion on that. You might have a perspective on that. Write it and then submit it to different publications as an opinion piece or as a general guest contributor and see if you can get yourself published in that respect. When you're submitting it, make sure that you're looking at their kind of guidelines for how they accept pitches and how they accept opinion pieces. And then just try to kind of essentially shop it out there and see if you get any kind of bites for publication. You can also create and submit for larger events, submit an abstract to see if you can get a session to speak. You can work to pull a panel together. Like you can be a coordinator, a facilitator with people within your network to say, this is an important subject that I think we should speak to. Would you want to join this panel with me? And you can submit it to events like the bios or whatever like that. It doesn't have to be as big as bio, but are there kind of niche areas where you can offer your expertise at those live events and do the work to kind of pull the submission together? What else? I would say you could potentially look at working specifically with a PR firm who kind of who focus on these things specifically, you can submit yourself for different kinds of awards. I don't want to like shamelessly plug BioSpace here, but, you know, for example, there's awards like, you know, we're launching 40 under 40. There's lots of different kind of executive awards or niche awards that you can submit yourself to or your organization to. There's different ways that you can kind of try to find ways to put yourself in a position of authority, of credibility. But again, it's a long game. It takes a lot of effort. So you kind of just have to be prepared to, you know, commit to it and do things like a little bit and piece at a time and find opportunities when they arise and pursue them. But again, it's mostly about visibility and, you know, having something to say and, you know, making sure that you're making that effort. Lori, anything else before we kind of like wrap up here?
Not from my end. I think you covered it all.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Just as a reminder, we are going to be following up with a link to the recording, a link to the white paper for you to download if you haven't had a chance to look at it already. If you do have any questions, you know, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or email me directly with any questions that you might have, or Lori, if you have any questions. But otherwise, I hope everyone has a great morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Thanks so much. Thanks, Lori.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.